Hello and welcome to our tutorial. So in this tutorial we're going to look at setting up our FPS in Unity. So the first thing we're going to do is import some assets. You can see here I've just gone File, Save As, and I've changed the name of my scene here to Level 1, and then I've deleted the two kind of generic components. One is the camera, one is the directional light. What I've also done is in here it says Skybox Material. That's normally set to the default skybox, this thing here, so I have set that to be none. And I've also set the ambient color to black. It's normally sort of a grey color. So when we do eventually get a camera in here, everything will be black in the background. So let's import our assets. So we're going to start with our level. So this has come out of Blender as an FBX file. Actually, it might need a tiny bit of repair, actually. But we won't worry about that too much for now. So this has a couple of different materials, and we'll worry about getting them set up. And it has some animations on it. I think actually I'll turn off the animations. I don't want them. They were of a door opening. So let's go back here to our materials. So we have a whole bunch of objects here. These are all our meshes. So I have cables, I have doors, I have an array of door frames, I have that's sort of the main room, and then this is the main corridor that we're going to kind of traverse. So let's make some materials to go on these here. So I'm going to make a new folder and we'll call it materials. Now none of this is UV unwrapped, or I don't need to bring in images. So I'm going to go create and material. So I'm going to call this metal 1. And it's going to be basically the color of the walls. So we'll make it a slightly grey-ish color. And then we'll have a look over here at its properties, so how metallic it is. So we'll make them sort of metal walls, and then we can set how smooth the surface is and how much specularity there'll be. So there's metal 1. Let's make a new one. We'll call this metal 2. So again, we'll try and make it more metallic, and maybe make this a little. See if they're not a huge difference between them, but they might look nice side by side. I'm going to make a this one here, we're going to call it a glow 1, and this I'm going to enable emission, and I'm going to go in here to color, and I'll make this one kind of a bluish color here, and then I've got what's the value of the emission. Now if I make it too bright, you can see it kind of I lose a lot of the color. So we'll try that there. So that's a value of 3.7. And I'm going to make another one, which I'm going to try and make white. So I'm going to go material, I'll call this glow 2. And again, we'll enable emissions, and we'll make this white and try and make it really bright. And then I want a black kind of, or a very dark material, so we'll call this black. That's actually going to be sort of a charcoal grey, but so we'll bring it to about there. And again, we'll have a look at how we'll maybe leave it like that. So that'll be maybe for some of our cables. So if I click on my sci-fi, my level here, so we'll just make a folder first. We'll call this FBX, and then we'll put our level in here. So we're just going to drag and drop some of these in. So we'll go metal 1 into metal 1, metal 2 into metal 2. We've got glow 2 and glow 1, and then I'm going to put this black material in here into these where it says glass, and hit apply. Now, so let's have a look at what what we've done there, what do those materials actually look like on the level? Well, in order to do that, we have a few things to set up. So I'm going to drag and drop my blend file in here, and we can see some of the glowing sort of materials already. I can't really see inside this; it just looks black, and that's because I have no lights and I have no camera. So let's sort that out, even if it's just to for setup. So I'm looking here at the side in orthographic mode, and I'm going to drag and drop in my first person rigid body controller. So I'm going to drag and drop that in here, and we'll just move our camera slightly forward in our scene. So at the moment, that's what the camera sees. Now the camera, which is inside this is it here, has a sky set to be blue. So up here you can see a slightly blue sky. So we'll change that to be a solid color, and we'll make that solid color black. And you can see that the background is now black. I can't see anything really in this object because I've no lights, so let's add in at least one light. So we'll put in a point light. Let's see where that point light is. So that point light is in the middle of the corridor. So we can place that there, and now we're starting to see down here what the actual corridor looks like. We can see our kind of purple blue glowing material, and we can see where some of the doors are. Now if I look back from the side here again, I go back to my character and I bring this back, this door here, that shouldn't be there. So let's see if we can find that door. So that is not it. That's it there. So we're going to try and move this into the position it should be in, which is down at the other end of the corridor. So let's see where its partner door is. That's door left, so door right, so it should be somewhere around there. Okay, so I've got my point light here. We'll move it up towards the camera a little bit. We will duplicate it and move it. So I have now two lights in my corridor. Back to the first one, it's got a color that's white. So let's see if we can kind of complement the materials that are in there by making the light blue. So the light coming out from these kind of vents at the side should be a bluish color. And we'll do the same maybe with this one, only maybe we'll try something a little more purple. Okay, so now if I hit play, my character will just fall to his or her death because none of the objects here, none of these meshes have any physics. So let's fix that. So let's have a look at some of the major kind of components. So that's the room here, so that definitely needs a collision, so we'll add a mesh collider to that. We'll look at our main corridor here, that definitely needs a mesh collider, so that there's collision between that and the character. I've got these things here, these turrets, these are sort of meant to be non-player characters, we'll work on them. These kind of major turret, or not turrets, tubes here need collision because we could bump into them. I've got a little box here, it's kind of just off camera to my left, so I'm gonna I may end up duplicating that, so we'll add a mesh collider to that. Again, these are, while most of the geometry for this is up high and I won't ever bump into it, there are some low-hanging fruit here, so I might bump into them, so I need some collision on that. I've done that one and that one. And this needs a mesh collider as well, so this is like a pillar in the middle of the room. And then I've got my doors, so yeah, we need to have collision on the doors, or we'll just walk through them. And then I've got my door frames, definitely need physics on them, so a collision. And I've got the door closed here, which is basically stopping my character from exiting the world backwards, so we'll put mesh collision on that. So I'm going to hit play now, and hopefully my the prefab that we're using will bring me into the world and allow me to walk along. So I can't walk through the walls, so I'm denied that. Let's see if I can walk through these doors here if I can go through, so I can't do that, so the collision works there. And let's see at the end of this corridor if I have collision, and I have collision on these doors as well. I can't just simply walk through. Okay, so on the most rudimentary sort of level, this is has functionality in terms of being able to traverse the corridor. Okay, so that's our initial setup. So I'll just save that, and that will save as level 1 as my scene. So let's take these doors here, door left and door right. We'll just look from above, and we'll add maybe some, well, actually we'll add animation to them later, but let's just pull them open so I can actually walk through. We'll just leave a gap there. So I'm just going to press play, and although the doors have collision, I can walk into this room. So at the moment there are no lights in here. So let's go fix that. So I'm going to hit escape. We'll stop playing, and we'll start by just duplicating one of the point lights that we have. Let's say the second one here. So let's duplicate that. Now if you remember, it's got kind of purple, so that may not suit the room. So let's press play and have a wander in and see what's going on. So now we can see that we've got our purple light. Now that light is basically inside this tube that's in the middle of the room, or if it's not inside it, it's very close to being inside it. So I'll try and hit escape here, and now I'm going to click on my light here. Now when you make changes in the while the game's playing, they're not saved, so you have to sort of amend, or you have to copy the settings afterwards. So we'll have a look at how to do that. So we're going to bring this back to being blue, and then we'll increase the intensity of this light. And then, as I said, it's kind of in the middle of this, so let's see if we can find out its exact position, if that's going to make a big difference to how it appears in the scene. Okay. And then what I should do is, you can see the range of this light is kind of very close to being the range, or like, so it's not touching the walls, the light, and now it is. So if I click back here, I can see a much better result. Now it's far less atmospheric, so but everything is much more visible. So it's a balance of what are we trying to achieve? Like, at what point are we? Is it so the mood, I suppose, is what we're trying to create. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it. We'll come back and refine these at a later point in our game. So before I finish, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say copy component, because when I press stop on the game, this has reverted back to being its normal self. But I can right click here, and I can say paste component values, and then these are the values that we were using during gameplay. So if I very quickly just test that, if I press play, I can walk in here, and then these were the settings in the room that we were left with. Okay, so that's sort of setup number 1. So we're 15 minutes in, so we will try and bring in one more asset and set it up, and again, just as in a kind of rudimentary sort of way. So the next thing I'm going to bring in is another FBX file. So I'm going to go import new asset. I'm going to bring in this character, non-player character. Now this is a very low polygon kind of character who started life as some poor orc. I don't know what it is now, but anyway, it is what it is. This has some materials that maybe we could reuse from before. I also have we'll need to make additional ones. So first of all, I'm going to go create material, and we'll call it NPC1. And I need to bring in I have a diffuse map for it. Now I'm going to take my material here and drag and drop that into there, and it is not a normal map, but I do have a normal map for that, so actually I don't know why I did that. Let's remove that. Let's just take away some of the shine off it. So if we go back here to our non-player character, we can drag that in there, and we'll put some of our and this is the handle of the gun that the character has. And then for the eyes, let's be a bit freaky and put in a glow. So we'll apply that, and that's our character. You can see that the UV unwrapping has not matched in Unity to what the character as it appears in the 3D program that I made it in, which is in Blenders, but we can fix that. We won't worry about it now. So what I want to do is set up its animations, this character. So the character has, I'll just open it here in Blender and show you its setup in Blender. This is the character here. It has a sort of single action or single animation called NPC1. Now there's another one in here called Walk1 that is not being used. So this here, from frame 1 to frame 60 is its walk cycle. From frame 60 up to frame 95 is an animation for shooting. And then from frame 100 to frame 150 is like an idle cycle. Okay. So we've placed all three in a row. Now I don't need to do that. I could go create new action and rename them and import them that way into Unity, or in this case here I just need to remember the numbers. I suppose having separate actions is probably a far more efficient way of doing it, but in terms of functionality they'll both behave the same way in Unity. So I'm just going to delete basically what's there. So orc walk1, so we're not using walk1, this is the one we're using, NPC1. And we'll call this walk, because it's going to be the name of the animation. And if we remember, it started at frame 1, ended at frame 60, so I'm going to send it to 59 and then tell it to loop so that it doesn't have a repeat frame. I want a new animation. It's going to be from NPC1 as well, and this is going to be called fire. And if you remember, that started at frame 60 and went to frame 95. But again, we'll finish it on frame 94, otherwise we'll have a loop. So maybe we'll have a little play of that to see what it looks like. Okay. And then the final one is our idle cycle. So again, it's from the right action, and we'll call it idle. And it started at frame 100, and it finishes at frame 149, and we'll also tell that one to loop. So again, we can, it's not a terribly exciting animation, but we can see the character moving backwards and forwards, and then we can go back to our walk cycle and have a quick look and see if that's working. And you can see the character's just walking on the spot. Now there's ways to, you can put in, there's different types of animation systems here. I'm not going to go into with you now. We'll do some of them in class. So I can have a humanoid. I can get the animation to make the character actually move forward in the world if I want to, by using animation based on a root bone. But we're going to keep it just simple for now. So they're all sort of set up, those three animations, and I'm just going to hit apply. And when I do that, when I open up the character here and see all of its different kind of components, so we've got you know, these are sort of the overarching objects. I have a light that I shouldn't have there. I'll have to delete that. I've got the body, which is the mesh from the body, the mesh from each eye, and the mesh from the gun. which is very low polygon, and then I've got these 3 animations that we've just created that are connected to the setup here. So let's just drag and drop our character into our scene. Now it's immediately changed because that character has, and shouldn't have, has a light that is coming in from Blender. That's beside the character. So not good, but we can fix that now. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open this up and I want to delete the point light. Now if I try and delete it straight away, it'll give me an error. So I need to take this and say unpack prefab, and now I can select that light and I can delete it, and we're back to our original lighting. Okay, and we can bring this right up to, so we can see where our lights are. So here, and maybe we'll just move the character here, and then we'll maybe increase our intensity, and we'll illuminate the character a bit more. Okay, so if I press play, now this has no physics, so I can just walk through it, but if we ignore the poor image that's on it, there's the character. Okay, so we'll set up do a little bit of work on his animations, the character's animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this animation, and it'll end up with lots of animations in it, but from doors opening to characters walking, etc. So in this I'm going to create what's called an animator controller. The animator controller is it's just an item in Unity that lets us control those 3 animations. How does it go? How does the character go from walking to firing to etc.? How do we control the animations? So we'll call this non-player character 1, and we'll leave it at that. And you can see here now I've got extra things that weren't there before. So this is the animator controller here. So I want the 3 animations. Now I'm going to bring idle in first, and deliberately doing that. That's now the default animation. It should play that on start, and I can bring in fire, and I can bring in walk. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to bring my camera forward and down a little. So when we press play, hopefully I'm not going to fall through the floor. No, so I can see the character there straight away. Okay, so let's have a little look at these 3 animations. So each animation, I have kind of its basic info here. The one that's orange is the default animation, so it'll kind of play on startup. If I wanted to make another animation, I can say, set as default layer state, and then that would turn orange, and then this will be the one it'll start with. And what we want to do is set up the relationship between these. So I'm going to make a transition, so I can go from idle to fire. I want to be able to go from fire to walk, and from walk back to idle. If I'm idle, I want to be able to go from that state to being able to walk. If I'm walking, I want to be able to stop walking and start firing. And similarly, if I'm firing, I want to be able to go back to being idle. So you can see, there's 6 relationships here, and if I had more animations, it would become quite complex. So we're going to add in some parameters here, and the parameters are basically, well, you'll see how they work now. I'm going to add in some Boolean parameters, which are basically true or false. So I'm going to call the first one idle. I'm going to hit plus here and add in another bool. I'm going to call this one fire. And the next one is going to be walk. And they're all lowercase, and when we address these in code, when we start writing scripts, we'll need to name these, and we need to name them accurately. So I'm going to have a look at this first one here. So I'm going from the idle state, that animation, to firing. So how do I transition? Well, it says the condition over here is empty. I want to say, so when idle is true, that's not when fire is true. So when fire is true, go from this animation to this animation. And I'm going to turn off this here, which has exit time. So that means it'll immediately happen. It won't wait until this animation is finished. And then for this here, if I'm playing this animation, the fire animation, to go back to idle, idle should be true. So that by default is set up correctly. Again, I'll turn off time. If I'm firing and then I'm going over, I want to change from this animation to walk, the condition that I need to be true is walk is true. And vice versa, if I'm going from walk to fire, then fire needs to be true. And these work in a similar way. So if I'm going from walk to idle, idle needs to be true. And if I'm going from idle to walk, then walk needs to be true. Now let's just see these in practice, how they, how they affect the game. But before I can do that, I need to select my character here, and it says controller none. So I need to put this in here. I need to tell it that this character is being controlled by this animation controller. So when I press play, now I'm going to try and hit escape and see if I can there we go. So we can see the character now, but I have access to these controls up here. So at the moment idle, it's not true, but it's playing idle by default. So the character is actually moving. If I turn that off and I turn on fire, you can see the character playing a loop version of the fire animation. And then if I turn on walk, he'll walk along. So when we're in code turning things on and off, we'll have input which will be, say for example distance. If the player is below a certain distance from the non-player character, then have them walk towards the player. And then if the distance gets even smaller, stop walking and start firing. Okay, so that's just to kind of give you an overview of how the animations work. And this is a state machine, so these are different states, and we're trying to work out the relationships between them. Okay, so we're 27 minutes in, so I'm going to stop now. So this is our basic setup in Unity. Now we will refine this, we'll relight it, we have more work to do on materials and on scripting to get these things to work, but just in terms of importing our FBX files and getting them set up in a kind of a rudimentary way, this is our first step. And then the next couple of tutorials we'll look at refining all of these and making it a bit more interesting, putting in a UI, maybe a timer, and getting it turning it into a proper game. So we'll leave it there for now.